Scarborough profoundly undermined that by making it seem cynical, pretend, concocted, political. And there's additional reporting, and I wrote about it today from Puck News, that the motivation, of course, for this is fear. They're terrified. And they went down to Mar-a-Lago, and they did what they had to do to cover and protect their asses, which is not the thing to do if you hold a seat which you hold with importance in the hierarchy of American journalism. So Mika justified this by saying Zbigniew Brzezinski, a Pole, the Jimmy Carter era national security advisor, would have appreciated this because he was a diplomat, and he would have processed this as a diplomatic act. Nonsense. He would have regarded it as a capitulant act. Mm-hmm. He would have seen it for exactly what it was. And it has created a profound crisis of credibility at MSNBC, which actually won't exist for very much longer at all as we enter into the early hours of the Trump administration.
Yep.
So they didn't speak up in service of the truth, which would have been brave to sort of buck your audience to say something that's true. They spoke up in service of themselves. My question for you is, did they have any sense that this would effectively nuke the remainder of their audience, which profoundly disagrees with the direction that they're now going?
Well, arrogance is a vice in these things because it distorts your perception, alters your reality. And I think that in their world, you heard them say it, that they've been heralded by their friends and phone calls from around the world while 40% of their audience cratered. And the reality is that they work in the trust economy, and they obliterated the trust that they had with their audience because at the core, the show has become married to power, right? And this is so important to understand. Joe Biden's political advisor should not have been the MSNBC morning host. And his guests, like John Meacham, shouldn't have been the president's speechwriters while pretending to do analysis about the historical meaning of the president's speeches that he was writing. It's an enormous conflict of interest. And all of that accrues until this moment that Joe Scarborough looks into the camera regarding Joe Biden and he says, this is the best version of Joe Biden there's ever been. Analytically, intellectually, and anybody who says otherwise, fuck you.
Yeah.
And in that instant, direct quote, he laid down the law that you stay on that side of the line if you want to come on my show, which in the eyes of the national media is a prestige show that makes all sorts of good things happen in their media careers.
That's right.
The problem with that is he is one of the architects of a political disaster in the country that's without precedent. And I say this to audiences all the time. And I don't care if you're a progressive, a conservative, right? This is aimed at functioning adults. Adult life requires you to hold multiple contradictory thoughts in your head at the same time in order to survive it. Donald Trump is the most prolific liar who has ever held a political office in the country, but a plurality of the country thinks he's the most honest candidate they've ever seen because of his authenticity. And so let's look at three things. Who is telling the truth as a practical matter about Biden's fitness? Would that have been Anita Dunn and Joe Scarborough, or would it have been Donald Trump?
Mm.
Who was telling the truth? Who was telling the truth about the condition of the border? Would that have been Anita Dunn and Joe Scarborough, or Donald Trump? And when it came to the economy, a lot of the media was celebrating Joe Biden as FDR 4 months into his term, when we were in an inflationary cycle that was really hurting working class people who remained completely invisible to people like Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, who in the end did not use this powerful platform to preach a gospel of idealism. They used it to promote their self-interest, their pet projects. It was cynical, and it's all come undone because the age of access media has ended. And another thing that's ended is this era where, as a trophy, billionaires would match their egos and their hopium and their platitudes with the purchase of a legacy news organization.
Yeah.
Running a newsroom now to require a lot of guts, a lot of integrity, a lot of fortitude. And so all these companies are going to be sold by all these people because, for the same reason that Comcast just did. The $164 million market capitalization company, that's cable assets are worth $7 billion. So the easiest decision a CEO has ever made in America is the decision that I'm not going to risk 90% of my company's assets for a small percentage of them. So it's gone. It's gone.
And this is what is to me troubling, Steve, is Joe and Mika don't stand alone. They're part of a trend of capitulation. You know, I think Bezos at the Washington Post deciding not to go forward with the Washington Post endorsement was an important symbol of that, but he was not the only one. You had Zuckerberg calling Trump. You had Sundar Pichai of Google calling Trump. You had Tim Cook over at Apple calling Trump. There's actually a whole Twitter drama unfolding right now where Elon Musk accused Jeff Bezos of saying negative things about Trump, and Bezos jumped on to be like, this isn't true at all. So, you know, I think you see this time around a level of capitulation to Trump and to his fascistic tendencies that you didn't see last time. And you see it also somewhat in the Democratic Party. Right. I mean, someone like Jared Polis coming out and being like, oh, actually, maybe RFK Jr. is going to be great at HHS. And Cory Booker sounding very similar notes. It's like, what is going on here, guys? Like, you've lost your minds, and it's quite obvious and apparent what's going on.
When you look at this moment, you have to look back at history to appreciate the model, and the model is the most extreme one because it's the most clarifying. So when Hitler came to power in Germany, and in the process of becoming a dictator, there were a couple of German institutions that were the most skeptical of the Nazis and opposed to it. And one of those institutions was the German military. They did not like the Nazis. The officer class of the German military was the German aristocracy. It was Prussian. They disdained what they called the Bohemian corporal. Guess who and what was the first institution in Germany to volunteer to replace the oath to the German Constitution with the personal oath of loyalty to Hitler? The military. So fear produces nothing good. Produces panic. Panic produces a loss of judgment, creates rash actions. It makes people do things that, absent the fear, that they would never, ever, ever do. So all of these people are doing precisely what you would expect them to do, which is to line up, to kiss the ring, to stay in line, to maintain their license to operate. And if you're a CEO of some of these companies, that license to operate means making astounding amounts of money a year. Now, you look at the CEOs of some of the media companies,